I remember a couple times talking to the lawyers at the company I was working for then, and it was so strong on their side, they said, well, go ahead, go for it. And so, yeah, I did. There were some stories I'll share along the way that, because I had you on, I was prevented access from a couple of big bands for a while, briefly. So eventually, after I've had you on, then the big media starts to talk about this. Courtney Love, it's interesting, you asked her many times to sue you. You said, Courtney, if it's not true, sue me. And she wouldn't sue you. You begged her to. And she's threatened that she'd sue, but nothing happened. What do you think's going on with her?
What I had been telling everybody, and I didn't expect them just to take my word for this, but of course I had to say what I believed, is that she will never sue me or anybody involved in this case where I would have to get involved and get on the witness stand, because there's this thing called depositions. And in a deposition, you get to ask the attorneys get to ask more questions in a deposition, and the field is more wide open for questioning than it is when you're in a courtroom on a witness stand. So a deposition is a fact-finding mission. If she were to ever file a lawsuit against me or about somebody that had me on the air, whether it be radio, TV, or anything, we're going to get to depose her. And her attorneys, I know, her attorneys would never allow her to be deposed, because then we get to ask her all of these hard questions that she's always refused to even comment on. When she's doing an interview and it sounds like somebody's even headed in that direction, she'll just get up and walk away. In fact, there was a period of time where she was having people sign before interviewing her some type of a waiver saying they wouldn't ask any questions about Kurt Cobain's death. So,
what would you ask her? What would you ask her if you could cross-examine her?
Oh, boy, at one time I had a whole list of questions because I was doing a lot of radio interviews and people were asking me that. I don't have that in front of me.
Oh, it's okay.
I actually did type out a whole list of questions that would really nail it down. Of course, she would kind of talk like a politician and talk around it. I mean, I've tried that with her on the phone, and she just manages to change the subject real quick and get off onto something else, So,
what you got to understand is you knew Courtney to the point that she would do drugs in front of you, knowing who you were. I mean, she was completely wasted a lot of times. You would go and talk to her, right?
Yeah, and one time I remember I was talking to her on the phone, and I had this on tape, and you could hear the rubber band snap up, and you could hear her doing heroin and the little moan that you get after you first shoot up and everything. And what was so funny is a few days ago, or a few days after that, I was talking to her again, and she said, oh, yeah, I haven't done any heroin since Kurt died. And I said, Courtney, you just did it the other day while we were on the phone. And she says, oh, well, nobody's perfect, All the story, it was amazing to look at what was coming out in the media, because since Courtney Love was a celebrity, at that point, mainly because she was Kurt Cobain's wife, or widow, that since everybody wanted to talk to her and interview her, basically she was allowed to just tell whatever story she wanted. And there was so much stuff going out there that I knew just was absolutely not true, that Courtney was feeding to the media, but I was there. I was with her. I went back up to Seattle. We went on a drive together. We went out to the Carnation property together, and then a bunch of stories came out in the media about how we found, when we went up there, we found tire prints proving that Kurt was there and all that, and that wasn't true. Anyhow, it went on and on, just watching the lies and the phony stories fed to the media. And then when I get on there and I just try to tell the truth from my experience and my opinion, and draw my conclusions based on the evidence that I've seen and the statements that I've heard, it's like I'm treated like, you're just trying to make a buck off of this. I mean, Courtney Love, with knowing Kurt for 2 years, made millions off of his death, whereas if there would have been a divorce, which is part of this whole outline of the case, they were facing a divorce. They were in the process of separating. People didn't know that at the time, but it's accepted as a fact now. But if Kurt would have left her, she would at the very most have inherited everything, half of everything, And her record album, which was coming out in a couple of weeks, would have just gone down the tubes because everybody loved Kurt Cobain and people didn't really know that much about Courtney, and those that didn't like her a whole lot. But if Kurt Cobain commits suicide, and Courtney even said this in a telephone conversation right after Kurt's death that she had with me that I have on tape. She said something like, the sympathy goes to me, and who knows, it might even help sell records,
Man.
Yeah, that's on the website. You can listen to those recorded conversations on CobainCase.com. Just go to the audio link, and you'll hear a lot of excerpts from those conversations there. And there'll be more in this documentary as we go along.
Yeah, well, this is a great place to pause. When we come back, we will talk about the evidence pointing to Courtney Love. Well, again, what makes her tick, and we'll go back in time and talk about some of the pressure that she put on and the clout that she had for a while. 866-482-1011. I know we're spending a lot of time laying groundwork here because this is the first time a lot of you are hearing it, unless you've heard them on the Sunday night show. And the last one we did of those was back in, 2004. So anyway, we're going to take a break. It's Tom Grant, 866-482-1011, or go to twitter.com, look for Allan Handelman, or search If It Rocks.
Come on, people now! Smile on your brother! Everybody get together! Try to love one another right now!
What really happened to Kurt Cobain, that mystery lives on in books, documentaries, unsolved mystery. And, it's Tom Grant who keeps it alive. He did the great investigation. I'm telling you, the evidence would stack up about 8 inches, maybe more, just the stuff that I collected back in the 90s between 96 and, 2004. Unbelievable. So let's, in this segment, and then we're going to have a whole hour after that, talk about some of the strongest evidence pointing to Courtney Love.
Okay, I'll go through the outline that just kind of touches on the main pieces of evidence, and then I'll finish up with the strongest piece of evidence that actually proves that Kurt Cobain was murdered.
First if you of all, could, just so you pace yourself, so we got another break in about 5 minutes, so just pace yourself. Know we have a break coming. Go ahead.
I think I can get through the outline in that time.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
As mentioned before, people didn't realize it at the time, but Courtney and Kurt were facing a divorce. Right after Kurt was found dead, when I came back to L.A., Courtney's own attorney, Rosemary Carroll, who had an office up the street from me, called me up. And when I walked in the door, she put her head down and started shaking her head and said, do you think Courtney was involved in this, Tom? Because, she called me a few weeks ago, and she wanted me to get the meanest, most vicious divorce attorney I could find. Now, I'm getting this from Courtney's own attorney and Kurt's attorney. I mean, she worked for both of them. But she said, I love Courtney and I love Kurt, but I have to tell you this. And so she was suspicious, and you'll hear that in the recorded conversations, too, that I had between Rosemary Carroll and myself. Someone was using Kurt's credit card. Attempts were made on that credit card, even after we now know Kurt Cobain was dead. But as soon as it was mentioned on the radio that they found a body, the attempts stopped. We got a record from the credit card company that shows that. And that's the same credit card that he used to book his ticket back up from L.A. to Seattle. But yet it wasn't on the body, and somebody was trying to use that card. The police never bothered to try to even track that down. Cobain was in fear of his life. He lived on a property, and with his fame and everything at that time, it was a fairly new house that they just moved into a few months before, and it was very accessible to the public. They lived right next to a small park with just bushes separating them. There was no fence. Anybody could walk right up the driveway. He purchased that shotgun for safety. That's what Dylan, his best friend, Dylan Carlson, told me. And the shotgun, when he was found dead, was loaded with 3 shells. You only need 1 shell if you're going to shoot yourself in the head.
Yeah.
You don't need to load it with 3. And it was light load, because Kurt, if he was there to protect the property and scare somebody off, he wasn't there to kill somebody. He wanted to scare them off, so he deliberately purchased light load and a 20-gauge shotgun. I'm sorry, not a 12-gauge shotgun. So, and then the police claimed there were no legible fingerprints on the shotgun. The fact is, the police reports indicate themselves, and this is proof, this is not just something that I'm saying, it says